and welcome to Author to Author. Today I am with an award-winning and critically acclaimed internationally published writer with works appearing in print, online, radio and television. His first publication credit was at the age of only 9 when he wrote an award-winning poem. As an adult, he received special recognition from L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future contest. He has been an editor and publisher of 19 news and literary publications, both online and in print, with circulations as high as 770,000. He was also a high-performing athlete, qualifying for international competition in Greco-Roman wrestling. He is a communication professor and a nationally recognized wrestling coach. He was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he continues to live, coach, and teach. Please welcome author W.D. Kilpack III, aka Bill Kilpack.
Well, thank you for having me.
Amazing life you've had, Bill. Let's quickly talk about your journey as an author, starting from your first publication, which was a poem. I can't wait to hear your story.
Well, the poem that you're talking about, I wrote when I was 9, and my gifted and talented teacher, Ms. Adams, she entered it into a contest, and I didn't know she was going to do that, but she did, and it took first place and it was published, and that was really where it started. Previous to that, I'd wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to open my own company doing comic books, and I've always loved superheroes, and I still do. And so I was still doing that, at that time, and she started a newsletter where I was the cartoonist, and I wrote. I was a reporter also, and I wanted to be a cartoonist until I was 12 when I wrote my first fantasy novel. And again, I had a teacher who really took an interest, just like Ms. Adams. Mrs. Farron took an interest that was way beyond her job description. She actually suggested that I write a novel, and she taught 2 of my classes, gifted and talented in language arts. And regardless of what the writing assignment was, she told me to write for each assignment to write a chapter of the novel. And so by the end of the year, I finished my first novel, and I was 12, so it is the work of a 12-year-old. But when I was done with that, I just thought, this is what I want to do. And so then I just continued doing that. And I have manuscripts that are all my handwritten books that I had done, written in pencil. And and then when I was in 8th grade, I had a teacher who was my computer science teacher, and she read 3 of my novels that were handwritten, and she pulled some strings so that I could have a class period during the day where I could be in the computer lab typing my books. And that was another one that was really a huge influence. And then I had teachers in high school that really supported me. One was Mrs. Sawaya, and she was the newspaper advisor, and she really pushed me to be on newspaper staff. And so I was the cartoonist. I wrote a column and was a reporter. And then eventually I became editor of the paper there. And she also was the literary magazine advisor. And I got to be editor of the literary magazine for 2 years. And she really just read mountains of my work.
Truly amazing. And you have been an amazing writer yourself, but you keep mentioning the names of your teachers. Have you sort of done the same for your students as well? Have you also encouraged them to write? Because I think writing is an amazing thing. It can be a stress buster. It can help them to ideate as a student. I wish I would have known about the benefits of writing when I was a kid. Of course, I didn't have guides like you in school, but are you doing the same thing with your students as well?
I try. That I teach at the community college, so my students are older. They're already, more well-formed, but I have had students that when I read their work, I've told them how good they were and recommended some places that they submit work for publication, and that has, they have, I think all of them have ended up being published at the publications that I suggested. And so I do what I can. I put a lot of work into trying to teach my students as much as I can about writing. This may sound scary, but I tend to match them in ink. That they turn something in and I will write all over it with things that are trying to I try to teach them as much as I can. And so I've had lots of students that have just really appreciated that and how much time I put in, and have come back with comments about how either their supervisors at work or instructors in other classes have made comments about how much their writing improved, and so I have done what I can that way. But teaching older students, I don't feel like I can have as much of an influence, but as some of those did on me when I was younger. However, I try.
Truly, truly amazing how much a teacher can impact the life of a student. I was just talking to somebody about half an hour ago about the EVAC movement, or the EVAC methodology that was first used in a school in Jacksonville. I think that is a wonderful methodology wherein they've actually used writing as a way to help kids who had a troubled childhood or any trauma that they've faced. And they've used writing as a very beautiful medium for these guys to find an outlet, for these kids to find an outlet. And I think truly amazing what an effective teacher, what a good teacher, how much positive impact can they have on a student's life. That's truly amazing. Bill, let's quickly talk about your book series, the new Blood series. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, it's an 8-book series, and the first 2 are published. And what it is that in book 1, Crown Prince, then it starts out with the birth of the Crown Prince, and that makes sense. But the main character, his name is Nathar, and Nathar is the guardian of Merrick, and Merrick is the nation where mankind was created in this world. And one of the things that is necessary to become guardian of Merrick is that you have sight. And so what that is that Nathar can see into the future, and if he touches things that were either significant or were present during significant events, then he can also see into the past. And one of the things with Nathar is that when that happens, then he calls it being seized by the demon of sight, where sometimes it is so strong that he literally can't move. He goes into a trance-like state. And that element of his character is really inspired by Socrates. That one of my undergraduate degrees is in philosophy, and I was always fascinated by Socrates, who would go into a trance-like state, which he called being seized by the demon of philosophy. And then he would come out of that with an epiphany, with some truth that he had not identified before. And that always fascinated me, and I wanted to use that in a character at some point, and that's what happened with Nathar. So in Crown Prince, then Nathar succeeded his father as guardian of Merrick, and so for 2 generations, they have been preparing for the fall of Eric, the capital city of Merrick, and gone to great lengths and invested countless thousands of hours in preparation for him to be able to escape this medieval city when it's under siege. And so book one is the process of it starts with the childbirth and then escaping when the city is about to crumble around the king's shoulders, and then escaping to the ancient wood with a wet nurse who's there to care for the baby. And the ancient wood is I think it's a pretty amazing place. That it's where the old gods created pretty much all of the life that exists was in the ancient wood. And so one of the things that I mentioned in the book is that the powers of creation are still alive there. And the trees are huge, thousands of feet tall. There are various races of people and great beasts that may or may not be intelligent. And one of the things with that is that the wet nurse, whose name is Darshell, is terrified of the ancient wood. But Nathar is one of the few people who understands it enough that he could live there safely. And so then, it's getting to the ancient wood, and then through 7 years of the Crown Prince's life takes place in Crown Prince.
Well, grab your copies now. It's of course an 8-part series. When can we expect the next part, Bill?
I hope to have the book 3, which is Demon Seed. I hope to have that out at Christmas, and my plan is every Christmas to have a book come out. I would actually love to do it sooner than that. However, my goal was to have Order of Light by Christmas, and I failed. So I'm giving myself a little bit of a buffer. Mm-hmm. But hopefully by Christmas, Demon Seed will be out. I have already done another pass of editing on it. It's pretty close to polished. The cover design is already done. And I've started work on the cover design for book 4, which is Rilari.
Wow, can't wait for the next one. Guys, all the books are available on Amazon and Amazon Kindle in paperback and ebook format. Grab your copies now. Right, moving on. Bill, I wanted to ask you, how difficult is it to, write a series? Writing one book is okay. You've got to start, you've got to finish. But with the series, you have to keep going. There has to be something in the end of your first book so that you can take it forward in the next book, and so on and so forth. And you've targeted yourself with 8 books. So how difficult is it for an author to commit to one series?
Well, there are a lot of writers who have talked about writer's block or experienced it, that sort of thing. And
yeah,
fortunately, that's not something that I've had to deal with. It seems like there's always something, going on in my head that I want to write about. In the case of the new Blood Saga, I had a recurring dream, and it just kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And then I finally decided to write about it. But sometimes I might hear a lyric in a song, and it just makes these thoughts start flowing. And so I'll sit down and write a paragraph or 2, and sometimes that one paragraph turns into 3, and then 3 paragraphs. The next thing I know, I've written 10 pages, and then I've got the idea nailed down so that I can come back to it when I have time or opportunity. With the new Blood Saga, my original thought was that it was going to be, when I started writing it, was that I realized that in one book, I couldn't get the emotional impact that the dream was having. And so then I thought, well, it'll be a trilogy. And then when I got to 3 books, I thought, okay, it'll be 6 books. And then when I got to the 6th book, I said, okay, it's going to be 8. And because it was kind of, I've heard people describe this as almost like channeling. The story is just going through me. And my wife, sometimes I read these stories to her, and she will, I have some bad guys that she loves to hate. And that's awesome. That's my goal, is for people to hate the bad guys that much. And she'll get mad at me about things that happen in the stories, and I tell her that, it's not me, I'm just channeling it. But the thing with that is that I know that it's not like that for everybody, and I feel very grateful that it's been like that for me. The thing that I tell my students is that the single most important thing to do is start. Well, I read a interview with Louis L'Amour, and this was back when I was like 14 years old, and it was in an in-flight magazine on an airplane. And the opening paragraph, it was set up as a Q&A, and the opening paragraph was this long paragraph saying, you've written this many books that got this many awards, and they were turned into this many miniseries or movies that got this many awards, and so on and so forth. And then the ending line on this long paragraph was, how did you do it? And Louis L'Amour's answer was 2 words, and it just really struck me. It was profound. His response to this huge long paragraph was, I started. And it had an impact on me in terms of school, in terms of my professional life. It just really struck me. And so I tell that story to my students. Start.
Yeah, I think first step is the most difficult step, right? Once you take the first step, then things start falling in place. People, specifically authors, I think, are scared of taking that first step. They don't have confidence in their own writing. Will it be received well? Will I get bad feedback? So those, I think, most of the writers. I know my cousin, she's been sitting on about 35,000 words for over 5 years, and she just does not have the confidence to publish it. She just can't take the first step. I think truly, truly amazing reply from him. Just 2 words, just start. Yep. Wonderful. Right. Bill, you've been an athlete, you've also been a coach, and you are also teaching. So what does writing really mean to you amongst this entire circle and everything that you do? What does writing really mean to you?
Well, writing is my real passion. If I had my dream, then I would sit at home and write books 24/7. And I'm not to that point yet where I can do that, but boy, I really want to. And the thing is that I was always prepared to write for when that feeling hit me. And so at high school reunions, I have people that bring up to me, that they'll ask me, do you still have that red 3-ring binder with all the lined paper in it? Because I carried it around with me. I had it with me so that if I had to, then, if something got my juices flowing, then I could sit down and do some writing. And the answer is yes, I still have it. It is beaten to death, but I've still got it. And I've still got those handwritten manuscripts. And the thing with that is that the drive that, for example, with wrestling, that wrestling teaches you, wrestling is the hardest sport there is. And it teaches you, if nothing else, a work ethic. But also it teaches you that you can do hard things. In my opinion, Dan Gable is the greatest wrestler in world history. And one of his most famous quotes is, once you've wrestled, everything else is easy. And that really is true to a certain extent, that one of the ways that I approach things in life from that experience is that whatever I am facing in terms of a challenge, that's my opponent, and I'm going to beat my opponent. And that's the way I approach these things. And with writing, there are times where maybe I've had a bad day and I just don't quite feel like it. Well, grit your teeth and sit down and do it, because that's what you do. That's what I tell myself.
True. I've used one of the quotes you've mentioned about Dan Gable, amazing wrestler, amazing athlete. I have always used one of the quotes when I do coaching for the authors, and gold medals aren't really made of gold. They are made of sweat, determination, and a hard to find alloy called guts. I think this sort of summarizes for me the whole idea of writing a book. People see the cover page, people see the formatting, but they don't actually see the work behind it. And I keep telling authors, it's like earning a gold medal for an athlete. It's just that 5-10 minutes of performance, but they practice their entire life. Your book is not just a book. It's a lifetime's work that you're putting in over there. For some, it could be few months, and for some people, it's been years and years of work. There are authors who've been writing for 10-15 years, and finally they have the courage to publish it. So I use this quote with them, and I think amazing guy, Dan Gable. I really love this guy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for mentioning his quote. Right. So, Bill, when you look at the entire writing process, what is the most difficult part of your writing process?
Well, the most time-consuming is editing and going through and polishing, especially if you're editing your own work. That's absolutely the hardest kind of editing is editing the stuff that you wrote, because you know what you were trying to say, and it's really natural to fill in the blanks. And so one of the things, again, that I tell my students is to read it out loud, because your ear will pick things up that you might not if you're just reading it on the screen. So that's the most time consuming, but at the same time, I still enjoy it. That having those things where I catch a mistake that somehow I might have read over that same part 3 times and missed it. And then when I catch it that time, then I feel a real sense of accomplishment. The other thing with that is that it gives me the opportunity to make things better. And with the new Blood Saga, because it was just coming and coming and coming, I had to get it down. So I wrote the 8 books back to back, and there were things that I knew I was going to go back and flesh out later. And maybe it was something in book 2, but I fleshed it out in book 4. Well, then I can come back and weave that back in. And those things I really enjoy. And there are, I'm going through and doing that kind of reweaving process right now. And I'll tell my wife about how in this section, it's always bothered me the way that this went, and I was able to fix it. And those types of things that I just really, I enjoy those moments. And those are really I don't want to say it's the worst part, because I really do feel like I enjoy every part. And one of my favorite things is getting a paperback in my hand. And this might sound weird, but I will thumb the pages so it makes kind of a breeze, and I'll blow the air in my face so I can smell the paper.
Oh my God, the feeling is amazing. Ebooks are maybe the trend these days, but then the joy of holding a paperback in your hand is amazing. That smell, the feel when you touch the papers is truly amazing. Truly amazing. Yeah.
And that's when it's real.
Yeah, that's real. True. True. And something really amazing that you've said over here, editing might be a pain in the wrong area, but then it's necessary. It's the most important stage of your book. That is where your book will be shaped into the final product that your readers will reach. And I think due importance must be given to editing, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how time consuming it is. Editing by far is the most important part of your book. It is kind of a launch pad for your the final stage of launch pad for your book. So equal importance and interest must be given to editing, truly. Right. So Bill, let's again talk about something related to storytelling and writing. What comes to you first, the plot or the characters?
Well, both. I know that sounds like I'm not answering the question, but sometimes I'll have a dream about a character, and the character is what is important from the dream, and so I will sit down and write a few paragraphs nailing down that character, knowing I'm going to use them somewhere. Sometimes I'll get an idea for a story, but I don't know who's going to be in it or where it's going to be. Sometimes I will sit and I will draw maps and create worlds, and I don't have a story in it yet, but I've drawn the map. And with the new Blood Saga, all three of those things happened. That the recurring dream was the story. The character of Nathar was something that I'd been wanting to do since college. And then the map was actually an exercise I gave myself, because all my maps previous to this were hand drawn. I wanted to draw one on the computer, and so that's what I did. And while I was drawing the map, then I thought, well, what if there is a race of people here that are called the Aa? And as a result, all of these names of countries have a double A in them because they're naming them after themselves. And all three of these things got added, blended together in the new Blood Saga. And so, that I've had people tell me that because of things like that, I'm not a real writer. And I just, I blow that off, because it's like I've had people say that because I don't outline my books, I'm not a real writer. Well, the thing with that is that when I'm writing, if I can surprise myself, I know it's going to surprise a reader.
Right. I understand where you're coming from. What might work for me may not work for you. What may work for you may not work for me as a writer, maybe as an artist. Because let's face it, maybe writing is a scientific process and maybe you can quantify, but a part of it, which is probably the most important part, which is storytelling, is an art. And I believe you can't quantify it, you can't push it. It's there or either it's not there. I think you're right. You can't put a process behind storytelling. You can be disciplined when it comes to writing, but when it comes to storytelling, it could be anything. It could be maybe characters around me or situations around me, or for somebody like you, it could be imagination. So it's totally different. And I perfectly understand from where you're coming from. Right. Let's talk about your book once again. How did you come up with the title for your books?
Well, I like short titles. I like them to be, I've had books that the title is one word. Well, one of the books in the series, Rilari, that's one word. And then if you want to flesh it out more, then you can have a subtitle or something along those lines. I don't do a lot of that, but it is another option. And one of the things that I do to come up with the title of a book is just like how I come up with the titles of chapters. What is the main thrust in that chapter? Well, then that's the name of the chapter. And it might be a little bit of giving away what's coming, but so what? It gives you an incentive to go and find it, is the way I look at it. And so in book one, Crown Prince, well, the Crown Prince really is the focus of everything in that book. In Order of Light, well, the Order of Light, this secret organization, is the focus of that, of that book. So But on the other hand, I have named some books I've written, for example, after there was a character in one of my science fiction novels who didn't like his name. And so he always told people to call him by his nickname, which was Blaze. And so the name of the first book was Call Me Blaze, because he said it all the time. So in that case, it just felt right. And there wasn't really thought required. It just sort of happened. But in general, I try to encapsulate the thrust of the book when I give it a title.
Right. And which part of the book did you have the hardest time writing?
No, that I guess one of the things that requires a little more active thought is ending the book. And so one of the things that I've had readers that they finished Crown Prince or they finished Order of Light, and I'm accessible. I'm on the internet, so they email me and they're just so angry because it's not necessarily a cliffhanger, like somebody is about to die and then the book ends, but I do very deliberately end the book with something that something significant is going to happen, and then I feel like it makes you hungry for the next book in the series. And that takes more work in terms of how do I do this without overdoing it? How do I do it where it's not giving too much away? And that probably, particularly in this series, because I really tried to do that, to make it to where you finish book one and you're left with, what? Now I have to wait? And so that takes a little more work.
True. Right. Now let's talk about publishing as a process. You are a published author. You've also written in different domains as well. Which is your favorite part of publishing, and which is your least favorite part of the publishing process?
Well, my favorite is getting that first copy. There's just no question. We talked about that a little bit already, being able to hold it and smell it and turn the pages and sit and read it. And it's, it's mine and it's there and it's real. I just love that. And my least favorite, there's a lot of stuff that it's probably the randomness of publishing, sending stuff out, and whether you get accepted or rejected from this publication or this publisher or that is the hardest part. That I had another book publisher that wanted to publish my stuff, and then they ended up going out of business before it happened. I had another publisher that said they wanted to publish my stuff, and then they ended up in legal trouble and got sued, which put them out of business. And there's things like that you just have no control over. And that sort of it's almost like you need to be in the right place at the right time with the right people. And that can get very discouraging. On the other hand, things like that can just kind of come out of nowhere. My first time that I was hired to write was a random meeting with somebody who was looking for an editor. It was a publication that was a sports publication. And well, for example, I had a mustache when I was 12. I've always looked a lot older than I was growing up. And so, I met this guy and he told me to apply, and I did, and they offered me this editor position. Well, then I had to tell him that I was 15 and that I didn't have a driver's license. And he's like, oh, well, you don't look 15. And he says, well, okay, well, we still want you to write for us, but we're going to have to give the editor job to somebody else. And I was like, okay. but that just sort of fell in my lap. And things like that happen also, but it's the randomness that I think is the hardest part, that you know it's good and they're not accepting new work right now. Or another thing, I had a publisher, a managing editor at a publishing house who wanted one of my book series, and then I don't know if he quit or retired, but then when he was gone, there was nothing in writing, so that didn't get carried forward. So there's just a lot of that can be very discouraging. Yeah,
with traditional publishing, these ups and downs are there. That, of course, suspense is there. When you send the manuscript, the website clearly says that they would need at least 6 months, 3 months to 6 months to sort of revert. So that kind of suspense is there. You keep waiting, you pitch your idea to different publishers. Some reply, some don't reply. That really truly is part of traditional publishing.
Right.
That's why I keep suggesting young and aspiring authors, don't feel discouraged. It's been a long time. Your script has not been accepted. Why don't you try self-publishing? That is also there. I think, I would agree that that's the worst part, or the bad part about publishing, that even I don't like. Right. So, Bill, what do you like to do when you're not writing?
Well, you already mentioned I've been coaching wrestling since 1999, and that has been a major passion. But as far as when I'm at home, I love to cook. I think I'm a pretty good cook. And one of the things I started out just, what are the various things that I can cook on a grill? And so I've even baked bread and grilled fruit and things like that people are like, well, this is grilled? Why would you do that? And I was like, I don't know, why not? But now I've expanded my my base as far as cooking a lot since then. But for example, yesterday, for the first time ever, I made paella, and it turned out. So go figure. That I was afraid to try it because of watching MasterChef, where it's Gordon Ramsay's signature dish, and he destroys people for getting paella wrong, and so I was afraid to ever try it. But last night it turned out really well. It's his recipe, but it turned out really well.
True. We talked about writing. Take that first step. You've taken the first step and you've done it. Awesome. Touche to that. Tell us about your writing space. What do you need in your writing space? Is there any specific that motivates you? Something specific?
Well, I have a lap desk and my laptop, and so I can write anywhere, and I do. I do have a desk in an office in the house where I do spend a lot of time working, but there are times where I just need to go someplace else. One of the things that I do to try to help me focus is I'll plug in headphones and listen to music while I'm writing. And again, I've had people say, how can you focus when you've got, that noise blaring in your ears? Because I like pretty loud stuff. But the thing is that it helps me tune out the rest of the world. But at the same time, I've also my family has a cabin, and I can go up in the mountains by myself and just totally unplug and have nothing but the sound of the wind and the trees and the birds and all that. And it achieves the same purpose, where I can just sit and write. If I don't have my laptop, but you can hand me a notepad and a pencil, and I can go to town. I've got all kinds of little notes that I've done on the corners of pages that then I've torn out and kept because they're little ideas that I didn't have anything else to write it on. And so, and I guess part of that is just carrying around my 3-ring binder, that I was prepared to write no matter where I was. I can remember one time with my binder, I couldn't hold the binder up. I was on the bus, and so I took a page out of the binder and put it up on the window and was writing on the window. And I guess the bottom line is that if you really want to do it, then you can.
Yeah. Anywhere, anytime, anywhere.
Yeah. And that at one point I even had my computer and my desk right next to my bed, so that if I had a dream, I could just roll out of bed and type a few paragraphs.
Truly, I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Waking up at midnight or maybe after that, early morning, finally waking up everybody else in the room, my wife, and, making sure that idea is not lost, recorded somewhere, maybe audio recording, or maybe typing just on your phone, smartphone, or if the laptop is on, quickly typing it there so that the idea is not lost there. I know the feeling. Right? Bill, if your series, the books, were made into a movie, which actors would play your characters?
Oh, that is, my wife and I have sat and discussed this at length, because she knows the characters, she knows them as well as I do, especially with after all the time that I've spent reading them to her, reading my stuff to her. And so we have sat down and really discussed this at some length. And for for quite a while anyway, one of the things that I was thinking about for Nathar was Chris Hemsworth. And he's one of the characteristics about Nathar is that he's big. He's 6'6", and Hemsworth is big, and he can be very very physical, but and so on. But then an actor who I have recently discovered is because of the Outlander series, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but it's Sam and Hewen, but he's the main character there. He could be a good Nathar also. And if I did that, then there's a character, his name is Ellis the Elder, who is a very again very big but very charismatic character, and Chris Hemsworth could be could do a good job there, I think. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to say. I really should sit down and map out all the characters, and it's a lot harder than you think. I have a lot of respect for casting directors, because they see something that you may not, based on somebody's work and previous work acting. And so there are times where I've seen people cast who I thought, oh, that's not going to work at all. And Tom Cruise in Interview with a Vampire, when he was Lestat, I thought, no way. But it worked, and I really enjoyed what he did there. So that's not the easiest question to answer. I have actors who are some of my favorites, and I think I would love to have that person in a movie of one of my books, but I don't know where they'd fit. And then also I've had people that I envisioned in some of these roles that now I'm thinking, no, they've gotten too old for that role. But Martise is a very strong woman in book 2. Jessica Chastain could be a good Martise. And again, a name that's difficult for me to pronounce, but Catriona Balfe, who is the female lead in Outlander. I think she could do a good Martise. There's Matthew Fox, I think, plays a great, intense, intelligent bad guy. So he could be a character named Tavish, who he's a very complex bad guy who goes through some transitions during the series of the books. But again, you have some things that are described in how they look physically, and can you find somebody that has that look, that they're, it's harder than you think. And because we have sat down and my wife and I have discussed this really for hours over time.
Hmm. Because you understand the characters, you've of course lived them. It's your brainchild. She of course understands the characters, and I think truly amazing wherein you know the characters inside out. You've been able to decide on the actors, based upon how they would walk, maybe what would be their talking style, or maybe in terms of simple physicality, how tall would they be. So you obviously know the characters. And besides, Bill, for the purpose of this interview, you are the casting director, so you can choose the cast. And I must say, you've chosen a very formidable cast. It would be wonderful to see all of them together in a story.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be great indeed. Now I don't want a very generic response about your message for young and aspiring authors. I wanted it to be from the point of view of fantasy genre, because there is always this attraction behind fantasy genre. It's grand, so authors want to invest their time and their effort into writing a fantasy genre, and you've done it successfully. And there's also this idea of adding mythology to it. India has got a rich history, rich mythology. So there is always that, a situation wherein authors are using old mythology into their fantasy genre. They bring that old world sort of to meet the new world in terms of superhero series and everything. So what would be your message for the young and aspiring authors who sort of want to write or venture into specifically fantasy genre?
Well, I think even though fantasy has become, it's so much more popular now than it used to be. Growing up, that I was into science fiction and fantasy, that was not nearly as cool as it is now. But one of the things that I think a lot of people still have a little bit of a misconception about science fiction and fantasy is that it is pure escapism. And that really it's just not true. That the best science fiction and fantasy is all about the human condition. And what fantasy and sci-fi both allow is that you can exaggerate and distort certain elements to make those aspects of the human condition that much more clear. And a perfect example of this is, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That the distortion involved in the monster, the exaggeration, the amplifying some of those baser human instincts because he doesn't have the facades that society requires. And Victorian times were very prim and proper, and he is not. But I think that's a great example of that. And I think that the best fantasy and science fiction really is that. It's not just trying to get away from the real world.
True. It might not be a real world, but correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. Emotions are real, you talked about Frankenstein. That humane aspect is very much real. Maybe the story is fantasy, science fiction, but emotions will always remain real, right? And that is kind of a challenge, to mix those emotions, to portray those emotions through your fantasy story. And I think if an author can do that, the story is going to be wonderful, and I'm sure you've done that, and a lot to learn from you. Please tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you. Are there any websites where you are available? How do they get in touch with you?
The easiest way is to go right to my official website, which is kilpack.net. That's Kilpack with one L. It's KILPACK.net. And there are links right on the site that you can take you straight to the books. There is information about me if that interests you. I have photographs that readers have sent me of them holding the books, which I never saw that coming. And it's awesome. It really is humbling. I have videos where people have become members of the Knights of Rill, and I send them the vows of a Knight of Rill, which you don't see in book 1, but you do in book 2. And so people have recorded themselves doing that and send them to me. And it's just, on the one hand, it's very gratifying, but it's just amazing. So there you have links to those things on the website. You have some sample readings where I read some sections of both books. But Kilpack.net is the hub of this endeavor.
Great. And Bill Kilpack is also available on Amazon Author Central. You can view his profile and the list of his books as well, along with the purchase links. His author name, of course, is W.D. Kilpack III. Like I said, he's available on Amazon Author Central. Right, Bill, thank you so much for taking time out to be with me on the podcast. It was an amazing conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot, and hope that the listeners also enjoyed it. And they've also gotten a lot of resources from our conversation today. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with me.
Well, I'm very gratified that to receive the invitation. This has been a lot of fun.
It's my pleasure, Bill. Guys, that was author W.D. Kilpack III, aka Bill Kilpack. I'll be back very soon with another author. Till that time, take care, and thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. Have a good day.